Joining us now, Scott Taylor, the leading candidate right now for the nomination to be the Republican nominee for the 2nd District in Virginia. That is the seat that he had previously, Virginia Beach up through Williamsburg, Eastern Shore. And Scott Taylor, if he is the nominee, will go up against Elaine Luria in the fall. We have already predicted Taylor will be the nominee, and if he is, he will defeat Elaine Luria, who is one of the weakest candidates that the Democrats are putting up. She's done nothing. She says nothing. She's not engaged. She will not talk to anybody except her sycophant base. I'm not a fan of hers. In fact, I've never met the woman. I've called her office 100 times. She will not come on my show, have no engagement with anybody except her sycophant crew. And so that's my take there. Scott, great to have you with us.
John, happy Friday. Good morning to you and all your listeners out there.
All right, lots to talk about today. Let's start with the primary election. Look, I thought that the fact that Governor Northam made the lockdown through June 10th, which is kind of a weird date, like on a Wednesday, like why not the 7th or the 6th or the 5th? I think the fact that he made it on June 9th, I called it the Elaine Luria Protection Act. And let me tell you why. The only person that it affects is Scott Taylor, because if there's not a primary, maybe one of these other people could win. And if they do win, Elaine Luria gets reelected because of my judgment. You're the only candidate who could beat her. So I think he did that for one reason, and that was to protect Elaine Luria in the 2nd District. That's just my analysis. But what is the situation now there with the
So I that's interesting. I never really thought about that from that perspective, but that totally makes sense. I did think the 10th, of course, this arbitrary day that's not evidence or science backed. There's nothing. I was on the phone yesterday with the CEO of Centera, and there's nothing that I'm hearing that indicates model wise or anything that there's a reason why it should be June 10th. Of course, what one of my hunches is, and I may be wrong, is during the veto session, the Democrats will push for mail-in voting, and this will be something that they'll point to and say, oh, well, you can't, the primary people are, the orders to stay at home until the 10th can't have the primary. We need to have mail-in voting. That's what I think, but who knows? Everyone else is in the same position. We understand it. Our campaign is completely prepared to deal with whatever comes our way. We'll just have to, there'll be a huge uptick in absentee efforts, of course, try to get people to vote absentee. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's not evidence or science-based why he picked the June 10th date.
Because you're the only primary that matters, right? The other two federal offices.
That's true.
The 5th District, now stay with me. The 5th District, Denver Riggleman is being challenged. That's a convention, right? The 7th District, they need a nominee to go up against Spamberger. That's a convention. So whether it's June 10th or June 5th, has no impact on them. The primary for state Senate, there's a lot of people running for that. Somebody's going to be the nominee. None of them are going to beat Mark Warner. So that's irrelevant. So the only one that matters is the 2nd District, and they don't want you as a nominee. Now, why doesn't he want you as a nominee? Because he knows, like I do, that you're the only candidate that can beat Elaine Luria. On the other hand, if there's something other than a primary, that gives Ben Loyola an opportunity to win, a guy that ran against Ralph Northam for state Senate that he crushed in 2013 or something. Crushed him, all right? So he knows that guy's a weak candidate, can't win. So my hypothesis is the June 10th date was picked for one reason, and that was to do what they can to deny Scott Taylor the 2nd District nomination.
John, I think your analysis is probably right. It's probably better than mine, right? So, but we'll do whatever we need to do. I'm not sure there's anything that I can do to help change. I would love to see the press out there, ask the governor what. Of course, if it was the president, they'd be nonstop asking him, where's your evidence? Where's your science? Where's the models that says this? I will tell you that everything that I'm hearing in terms of the virus in Virginia, that the peak of the virus is going to be a little bit behind places like New York and stuff like that, a couple of weeks behind. But none of that puts it out into June 10th. That's late April, early May for the peak, at least at the moment. What the models are for the virus. But all I can say, John, is whatever comes our way, we will be prepared as a campaign to overcome it.
All right. So if what are the options?
Well, right now it's still primary. I'm not aware of any. I mean, the governor can't change the method of nomination. Obviously, that's on us as a Republican Party. What he can do is push it to the right. I mean, he could delay the primary to something like July or something like that. But as of right now, it is still a primary, and what you can now request absentee applications from the State Board of Elections website. And so we're going to start pushing, and we're going to have a robust effort to get people to vote absentee. We have literally thousands of people who have signed up to be on board. We got a couple thousand people who signed up to volunteer. We have thousands of yard signs out there. We have thousands more who have already signed on for our campaign. So we will push them to vote absentee, so that we're just prepared for whatever the governor tries to do.
Now, I think he's got the authority to push the election off for 2 weeks. That's the way I understand it. So he could push your primary off 2 weeks, which would be what, the 23rd of June, right? June 23rd, not a big deal. The Supreme Court of Virginia can push it off a month, so it could go to July 9th, right? So those are the two options. I mean, that's part of the rules. That could happen.
Yeah, he can't change the method of nomination to firehouse primary or convention. Like he does not have the authority to do that. Obviously.
He could just push it off for 2 weeks. But does he have the authority to say, look, we can't have this election at all, because
no.
He can't do that.
No, look, I'm not a lawyer or anything like that. But as far as I know, no. I mean, elections are by law, right? So elections will continue. So I am not aware. And who knows? Maybe you have a constitutional lawyers listening or something like that knows otherwise, but I am not aware of any authority the governor has to cancel an election.
He just has the authority to postpone it for up to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know he could do the same thing. There's a lot of local elections coming up in May. Some cities have, they elect school board and city council. I think that's the first Tuesday in May. Chesapeake's one of them. He has the ability to delay that for 2 weeks, or what they're telling me is he can simply say there has to be a mail-in ballot. So that's why some of the council people up for re-election and other challengers are trying to get people to get the absentee ballots in the event that it's that. But I just want to say this to our listeners in the 2nd District. I think Elaine Luria is a dreadful representative, has to go, and there's only one person that's going to beat her, and that's Scott Taylor. Ben Loyola cannot win. Every time he's run for office, he's got beat. After a while, you just have to say to yourself, you know what? I'm just not a good candidate. They know they can beat him. That's why they're going to do everything they can to deny Taylor to be the nominee so that she's in the best position to win again. And for the people of the 2nd District, I'm not there. If you nominate anybody other than Taylor, you're going to lose that race. And the stakes are too high. Oh, that is my opinion, and it's paid for and authorized by me. Now, Scott.
Well, I'll tell you, John. We've heard about some polling that's out there already, and we're already tied with Elaine. Already, our positives are higher than hers. Our negatives are lower than hers. I mean, and that's very bad at this point for an incumbent, which tells you that she hasn't done anything. Which tells you she hasn't done anything to make herself be more attractive as an incumbent to folks here, and that's clear. Look, Elaine Luria is not at all who she said she was, running as a moderate, pro-business, worked with Republicans, wouldn't tell you if she's voting for Pelosi. The reality is she's exactly who we said she is, 98% with Pelosi. She's not a moderate. She's anti-business. She hasn't accomplished anything, and she's not present in the district at all. I mean, she's she's about as effective as a wet blanket.
Well, she's highly ineffective. She's basically a clone of Nancy Pelosi, AOC, and the other far left people in there. She tries to hide it, but she's going to be exposed. So, Scott Taylor, let's get to this coronavirus.
Sure.
When do you see clear this? 10 million people unemployed. We're now projecting this is going to grow to 22 million people on the unemployment lines. We're going to have 18 or 20% unemployment. This can't go on before the entire economy would collapse into a prolonged depression, and we'll be back to where we were in the early 1930s or worse. So we can't allow that to happen. What do we do? If you're in Congress now, what do we do?
Well, there's several things. Let me first preface this by saying, like, I'm not a epidemiologist or I'm not an expert here, and the last thing you need is another politician trying to act like they are, because you see a lot of that today. But the reality is, yes, this is we're in an unsustainable path at this moment. What I try to do, of course, is sort of weed through all the crap and understand of things about the actual virus itself, and non-political type experts that are out there. I'm obviously very worried that the country goes from full employment to massive unemployment. That's a huge change, and I think there's going to be some changes coming out of the back of this that really changes, some of our society and the way that we behave, the way that we work, the way that we do other things as well, supply chains, all that stuff. I'm appreciative of the administration. I'm appreciative of the president, who has shown leadership in the face of tremendous opposition from the media and the Democrats, who clearly care more about beating him or political advantage than they do the people here. Nancy Pelosi, of course, just announced another commission, another political witch hunt in the time when we need to help people and healthcare providers and things like that. I'm worried about the PPE and getting healthcare providers things. I will tell you, John, that me as a private citizen, we found out that Centera and some of the hospitals here in Virginia aren't able to get some of the supplies because, of course, they weren't replenished in 2009 and under the last administration. And most of those things are going to places like New York and California and all the hot spots. Virginia's sort of second tier, and as we talked about earlier, the model's a couple weeks behind. We found out that 85% of the supply chain for this stuff is in China, the world's supply chain. Mm-hmm. That, of course, has to change. We can talk about that in a second. But in the meantime, we have to get our hands on some of that stuff because that's where it is. And one of the big problems is the lack of aircraft, right, that are going back and forth there, because there's only about 20% of flights that are happening. 20% of the number of flights before are actually happening now. So I started getting, you spent some time in the Middle East. I started calling ambassadors and contacts in the Middle East who own, and I can't disclose a couple countries right now, but I'm working with a couple of their airlines to help some of the logistic companies to get PPE and healthcare supplies for Virginia to make sure that happens. That's what I'm working right now as a private citizen, which is why I was on the phone with Centera yesterday. But we need steady leadership through this crisis. We need reactive leadership that's seeing, which this president, that's what you do in business, right? Mm-hmm. You take the problems as they come, you solve the problems, you figure out ways to get things done, and sometimes that may be politically, it might be popular or not popular. But from what I'm seeing now, I'm seeing an administration that's trying to react to the problems that are happening. The SBA is going to start loaning to small businesses, which is absolutely necessary today. There are some kinks with that, I'm hearing, of course. There are some kinks I'm hearing with the IRS issuing checks back, but that's not the president. That is bloated years of massive bureaucracy that's sort of stifling these things from happening. Now, you do need the president. He's running the ship. He's going to have to kick that bureaucracy. And I can tell you with my time in Congress, that's what you have to do. You have to have a champion who's pushing to make sure that the bureaucracy is moving, well-intended people in the bureaucracy, but it's a big ship. And you need a captain that's pushing to move that thing really quickly. So, I think that the administration is doing what they can from the government level. You need more collaboration and coordination with local, state, and national government as well. You don't need political finger pointing. You need collaboration. You need the states to push private industry to start getting going. America historically is slow in crisis mode to get started, but once you've awakened that sleeping giant, we kick it in, and you'll see people all over the country who are inspiring, from a high school student using her prom money to feed elderly, all the way to 3M making masks and Ford making ventilators. I mean, that's what needs to happen is more collaboration, local, state, federal, as well as private sector. That's the genius of America, is our private citizens who come together to be able to get things done.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with Scott Taylor, former congressman, 2nd District, Virginia, running again to be the nominee for the Republican Party for the 2nd District to take on Elaine Luria in the fall. She's a first-term Democratic Pelosi sycophant incumbent. Scott, you mentioned 3M. There was a report last night, and the president tweeted about this today, that 3M and their distributors, the masks are being produced by 3M. These are the ND19 masks. The
95.
Ones, 95 masks. And but their distributors are not selling them to states or other in U.S. governments. They're selling them to foreign countries who are coming to the table with cash and a higher price. What the hell is going on with that?
So as soon as I said 3M, I immediately remembered that I just saw the president's tweet about the 3M, and I didn't read the story. Look, I personally have had about 5 or 6 people call me, and a couple friends who say, I have a line on masks and stuff in China. They're trying to, because there are obviously people who want to profit in this crisis time. And the reality is those people who are calling me and saying they have a line on masks, they're like 3 or 4 removed. They're just trying to arbitrage and make money on that, which of course I haven't helped them at all. I think it's wrong to profit this time. I think the president does have the power, of course, under the act that he implemented to force these distributors to make sure that they stay here, that 3M manufacture those things, that the distributors distribute it to Americans. The reality is, in my opinion, it's morally wrong to be trying to profit when our people are hurting right now. And I can tell you right now, just in Centera too. I mean, there are people using trash bags because they're trying to get these supplies. And again, that's because 85% of the world's supply is in China, which also is wrong. So number one, the president should use his authority to make sure those things stay here. Number two, moving forward, we should look at essentially like a Berry Amendment, which the Berry Amendment, of course, is for the U.S. military, things have to be made in America with some exceptions. We should have a sort of a Berry Amendment for things like emergency medical supplies, like pharmaceuticals. There are over 100 life-saving pharmaceuticals, medicines that Americans take every single day to survive. We are completely beholden to China and even India for that. We should have it in a legislation that says any federal agency, VA, DOD, Medicaid, Medicare, that they have to, when they buy pharmaceuticals and or these types of medical supplies, they have to be made in America. Via our tax law that we passed the last Congress, there are opportunity zones around the country. States can then compete to try to get incentives to get those manufacturers to manufacture those medical supplies in opportunity zones around America. But that legislation should be already in the pipeline. If I was in Congress, it would already be submitted.
Well, that's why we need you there. I got a text here from a potential constituent, Ben, in Norfolk. Says, John, can you ask Scott Taylor, how can I get a Scott Taylor yard sign for my yard? That's his first question. How does he get that?
Well, sure, Ben, thank you so much. We appreciate your support. You can either send us a message on Facebook, Scott Taylor VA on Facebook, or you can send an email to Reagan, which is REGAN at ScottTaylor2020.com. Send us your address, and we will get it delivered to you. Thank you.
Okay, and his second question was, how do you feel about Pelosi opening another investigation against the president over the virus? And then we have to go.
At a time when people are in need, when healthcare providers on the front line asking for help, the notion that you would, in the middle of this crisis, open up another political partisan panel for, just like the impeachment is irresponsible and almost criminal.
Unbelievable. Scott Taylor, people want more information. Where do they go? ScottTaylor2020.com, ScottTaylor2020.com. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook at Scott Taylor VA. We'd love to have your support. John, it's always a pleasure to be with you and your listeners, and I hope you have a fantastic Friday. All right, Scott, thank you so much.